think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So firstly, there's a line from one of the letters of the Imam of our age to Shaykh al-Mufid which says, "We are not neglectful of attending to you, nor forgetful of remembering you." I want you to keep that in mind. Now, look at your right hand. Some of you are wearing a ring on it. Not on the left, but on the right. And if I was to ask you why, right now, without any warning, I think many would say a similar version of the same answer. This is what we do. It's something that we do. Now, that's not a bad answer. It's an honest one. But it's worth knowing that it's not the whole answer. And that there is a sentence underneath it, and that the sentence is more than 1,000 years old. And here it is. And you can find the references all in the write-up. The distinguishing signs of the believer are 5. The 50 prayers, the visitation of Arba'een, wearing a ring on the right hand, placing the forehead in the dust, and reciting in the name of God, the All-Merciful, the Especially Merciful, out loud. Now, we heard that sentence just a few weeks ago on the night of Arba'een. It was the anchor of that night. And some of you will remember it, and others will have forgotten it, and that's fine. That's what these nights are for. But 2 things about it before we go on, and I want to say to both of them out loud because this series does not hide its working. The first, the chain of that narration is what the scholars call mursal, meaning it is transmitted without the full sequence of names that would let us trace it back link by link. That doesn't make it false. It means it comes to us with a gap in the proverbial paperwork. Our tradition has a whole science for measuring exactly that kind of gap. And we're going to meet the man who built that science in about 40 or so minutes. But I'm not going to sit here and present it to you as though it were airtight, because it's not. And everyone deserves to be told. The second, the wording. Salat al-Khamsin, the 50 prayers. That's what the Tahdhib gives us, 50. Yet on the night of Arba'een, I said 51. And I was not wrong, because Misbah al-Mutahajjid and most of the other transmissions read Ihda wa Khamsin, meaning 51. The 17 units of the daily obligation, plus the 34 of the recommended prayers that surround them. 2 books, 2 numbers, 1 word of difference. I could have quietly said 51 again tonight, and no one would be any the wiser. I'm telling you instead because a community that only hears the tidy version of its own sources eventually stops being able to tell the difference between a source and a slogan. So, 50 in one book, 51 in the other. Now let us get to the question. Somebody had to write that sentence down. Somebody had to hear it and check it and decide it belonged in a book and copy that book and get copies out of the city before the city was taken apart. Otherwise, you'd be wearing that ring on that hand for a reason you could not name, and your grandchildren will be wearing it for no reason at all. So who kept it? We've already met him, we just didn't know his name. So, after the session tonight, go and take down your Mafatih al-Janan. Every house should have one. It's on a shelf somewhere, perhaps with a broken spine, perhaps with a bookmark in it that hasn't moved in a few years. Open it anywhere. A great deal of what is inside that book, the supplications for the nights, the visitations, the prayers of the months and the days, comes to Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi through one earlier collection, and that is Misbah al-Mutahajjid wa Silah al-Muta'abbid, the lamp of the one who keeps vigil, and the weapon of the devoted worshipper. That is the book. When you read from Mafatih, you're very often reciting somebody else's book one step removed. Now think back to session 63, where we met the compilers, Shaykh al-Kulaini and his al-Kafi, and Shaykh al-Saduq and his Man La Yahduruhu al-Faqih. Two of the four foundational collections of hadith in this school. There are four. Two of them are the work of one man. And it's not Shaykh al-Kulaini and it's not Shaykh al-Saduq. And one more. This series, this whole series, all 41 sessions of it, from session 61 to session 101, has a single subject underneath it. How does the guidance of the Imam of our age reach us during his absence? That is the question. Everything else is a mere chapter of it. The first great book our tradition wrote on his absence is also his. Not a footnote, not a simple minor transmitter, not one voice among many. Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi. Born in Tus in Khurasan in the month of Ramadan in the year 385 of the Hijrah, which is, in the calendar most of us live by, around autumn of the year 995. And the community that came after him did not, in the end, call him by that name at all. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move to a recap of some of the previous sessions, and then we carry on. So from session 67 and 68, we carry three things, and I'm going to state them and then leave them alone, because we did that work and I'm not going to do it again. First, he was Sayyid Murtada's closest student, and when his teacher died, he inherited the seminary, the Dar al-Ilm, the library, and the network of students that reached from Baghdad all the way to the Mediterranean coast. Second, the chair of theology given to him by the Khalif al-Qa'im bi-Amrillah, the most senior teaching appointment the Abbas al-Khalif capital had to offer, given to a Shi'i scholar. Third, and this is the one I'm going to state and then refuse to explain, he ended his life in Najaf. That is the fact. He left the greatest city he had ever known, the city he had lived in for nearly 40 years, and he went south into the desert and lived out his life beside a grave, and he was buried in the house he lived in over there. We're going to spend 3 entire sessions on that one fact, and I'm not going to touch it tonight, but hold this while we go. He had choices. Ibn al-Baraj was in Tripoli, his own student, established with a community all around him. As-Salar was in Aleppo, again, his own student. And Abu Salah was in Greater Syria. These are people we have mentioned in the previous sessions. If you're not sure who they are, please revert back to the previous sessions. You can find them all on our website, truthpromoters.com. He could have gone home to Khurasan, where he was born and where his family was. Yet he walked 150 kilometers into the desert to live next to a grave. Hold on to that. We come back to it in 2 weeks. Tonight we do something simpler. Tonight we learn his name. And then we find out that it's not a name. So if you go looking for this man in English, you will find him under a title rather than a name. You will find him as Shaykh al-Taifa. 9 times out of 10, the English books will translate it for you as the Shaykh of the sect. I want you to take that translation, put it down and step away from it. It is wrong. Not even slightly wrong, it is wrong in all the directions that matter. Sect is very close to the opposite of what that word actually means. And by the time we finish this section, you will understand why. And the man himself would have been baffled by it, because the word in his title is not a sociological term. It is a word out of the Quran, and it comes with a job attached. So let us take it apart. 4 steps, and we will go and meet him. So start underneath the word, at its root. Ta'ifa is built on 3 letters. Ta, Waw, and Fa. And if those three letters sound a little bit familiar to everyone, they should. They are the root of the word tawaf, the circling of the house of God, what everyone does in Mecca, what Abraham and Ishmael, peace and blessings be upon them both, built the house for. That root, and the Taifa is the group from Tafa Yatufu, to circle, to go around. You can find all the references in the write-up. Here is what that actually means. A Taifa is not a group defined by its edges. It is not a group defined by who is outside it, or by what has broken away from, or by the wall around it. A Taifa is a group defined by what it goes around. And there is a second thing that the lexicographers give us, which I want you to hold alongside this first. Ibn Manzur, who wrote the very well-known Lisan al-Arab, which is a lexical work on the Arabic language, under this same root says, and you can find the reference in the write-up, and the ta'ifa of a thing, a portion of it. A ta'ifa is a portion of something larger. It's not the whole. It never claims to be the whole. Built into the word at the level of its grammar is the admission that there is more than you. Now hold those two things together, because between them they have already destroyed the translation. A group defined by what it circles, which is only ever a part of something bigger. That is not a sect. A sect is the diametrically reversed or opposed of that. A sect is a group defined by its boundary, which believes it is the whole. Now the Quran, because this word is not neutral vocabulary. When the Quran uses it, it hands it in an assignment. 2 verses do the work, and the first one is in the battlefield. This is Quran, Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse 102, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And when you are among them and lead them in prayer, let a group of them stand with you and let them carry their arms. And when they have prostrated, let them be behind you, and let the other group come forward, which has not yet prayed, and let them pray with you, taking precaution and carrying their arms." This is what is known as Salat al-Khawf, the prayer of fear. We discussed this briefly during the days of Ashura. The army is exposed, the enemy is watching, and the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, is going to lead the prayer anyway. So the community splits. One ta'ifa prays. The other ta'ifa, and this is the word the Quran uses, stands behind them with its weapons in its hands, facing outward, not praying, but watching, keeping guard. And when the first group has prostrated, they change places. Think about it again and think about and understand what is actually being described. The ta'ifa is the portion of the community that stands watch so that the rest can pray. This is the cleanest definition of a Hawza you will ever hear in your life. And it's in the Quran. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with sects. And notice what it is not. It is not a privilege, and it is not a retreat. The ones standing guard are the ones who do not get to pray yet. They are facing the wrong way. They are holding a weapon, while everyone else has their forehead upon the ground. Now the second verse, and this is the one that matters the most. This is Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, the chapter of repentance, 9th chapter of the Quran, verse 122. And the translation I'm using is deliberately the Arbery translation, otherwise normally I use my own translation, and there is a reason for that which will become clear momentarily. It is not for the believers to go forth totally, but why should not a party of every section of them go forth, to become learned in religion, and to warn their people when they return to them, that haply they may beware. Now I have to be honest with you about this verse before I preach it, because there is an old argument inside it, and you should hear that the argument exists. The dispute is over one word, nafara, which means to go forth. Who is the ta'ifa? It is the group that goes out Is it the group that goes out in order to learn? Or is it the group that stays behind while the others go out? And it is the ones who stay who do the learning. Now, this might be a technical point, but there is a reason for why I'm going into it. The translators split down the middle. People like Arbery, who I quoted earlier, Qara'i, Qaribullah, have the Taifa going forth to learn. Sahih International and Yusuf Ali have the learning done by the ones who stay. Among the classical commentators, it splits yet again. And mark this because it matters more than the answer. It does not split along the lines that you would expect. Classical commentators like Qatada and Mujahid, and we'll come to these characters further in this series, say the learning is done by those who stay. And Al-Qurtubi, who is going to become very important to us in just a few moments, agrees with them. Hassan al-Basri says the ones who go forth are the ones who learn. And At-Tabari, a Sunni, the greatest of the early commentators, says the same. As does Allama Tabatabai, may God rest his pure soul, who says in Al-Mizan, you can find the reference in the write-up, this verse forbids the faithful in all of the regions other than the city of the messenger to go forth to fight altogether. Instead, it urges them to send a party of their people to the Prophet, may God bless him and his family, to become learned in religion while others go out to fight. So there it is. The Ta'ifa goes out. It does not go out to fight. It goes out to understand. And somebody else does the fighting. And Allama Tabatabai draws two conclusions from that. And I want both of them in this room tonight. Firstly, and again, you can find all the references in the write-up. Firstly, Allama says, that is what is meant by becoming learned. That what is meant by becoming learned is the understanding of the whole religious knowledge, roots and branches, not specifically the practical rulings. When we use the word tafaqquh, which is the word used in the Quran, this doesn't mean fiqh in the narrow sense that we use it nowadays. It is not go and learn the rules. Rather, it is the whole of it. Theology, law, mysticism, philosophy, exegesis, history, etc., etc. The roots and the branches. Now hold on to that, because in about 20 minutes, I'm going to show you a shelf, and you will understand why I made you hold this. The second, and this one is a ruling rather than an observation, Allama says, and again the reference is in the write-up, that the duty of going forth to fight is lifted from the students of religious knowledge by the indication of the verse. Somebody has to stand guard, and somebody has to be excused from standing guard so that they can study, because a community that only has fighters forgets inside one generation what it was that they were fighting for. And notice, please, that the verse does not rank them. It does not say the students are better. It does not say the fighters are better. Rather, it splits the work and assigns both halves. And it tells you that the community needs both or it perishes. And now I must shut a door. Because there is a way of hearing what I've just said which is completely incorrect and wrong. And it is, I'm afraid, the way a great many people do unfortunately hear it. They understand it as being, there is a class of men who are excused from fighting. A holy class. They study while other men bleed. No, not in this religion. And I want to be as blunt about this as I know how to, because we have neighbors whose faith is built the other way. And the shape of their arrangement has sadly leaked into ours. There is no priesthood in Islam. A scholar is not a different kind of human being. He receives no sacrament that changes what he is. He is not ordained. He holds no power to forgive you your sins. And he stands between you and God at no point whatsoever. Because there is no point at which anything stands between you and God. He is a layperson who has studied. That is the whole of it. He learnt jurisprudence, theology, Quranic commentary, philosophy, mysticism, and he worked on purification of his self just like you would. This is in the same way as anyone else could learn medicine. And he is to you essentially what a physician is to a patient. An expert you consult, not an intermediary that you require. And the turban and the cloak are not holy garments. They are qualifications. They are the letters after the surgeon's name, worn on our heads and over our shoulders because our tradition is older than paper certificates. Ayatollah Murtada Mutahari, may God rest his pure soul, who thought harder about the structure of the seminary than almost anyone in the last century, argued exactly this, that Islam has no clerical class in the sense that the word carries elsewhere. The religious scholar is a teacher, not a caste and not a guild set apart from everyone else. Now hear what the Prophet has said the scholar actually inherits. The Prophet has said, and you can find this reference in the write-up, the scholars are the heirs of the prophets. The prophets did not leave behind a dinar or a dirham as inheritance. They left knowledge. So whoever takes of it has taken an abundant share. The heir of the prophets. And the very first thing the Prophet does with that sentence is tell you what the estate does not contain. No dinar and no dirham. Hold on to that because we're coming back to it before this hour is out. So the exemption in the verse is not privilege, and it's not a permanent condition. It is a posting, and postings change. When the danger to a community is to its mind, when its young people are being argued out of their faith and becoming confused in a way that nobody else in the room can answer, then the scholar's place is at the desk, and going to the front instead would be akin to desertion. And when the danger is to the body, he picks up his rifle and he goes. That is not a theory. Look at what's actually happened in recent history. In Iraq, in the Iraqi rising against the British in around 1920, the men who led it were Maraja, Mirza Muhammad Taqi Shirazi, and after him Shaykh al-Sharia al-Isfahani, not blessing the fighting from a safe distance, but ordering it and directing it. The fatwa that began the revolt was Mirza Muhammad Taqi Shirazi's, and he died in the middle of it. Our current leader, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, may God protect him, who saw the Iran-Iraq war with his own eyes, has spoken about the seminarians killed at the front, and about two of them that he had known personally. One of them had been his own study partner for years. They had worked through the likes of Sharh Lum'a and al-Makasib together, page by page, before he went and he did not come back. And Imam Khomeini put the standard on the seminarians themselves in one of the last things he ever wrote to them. You can find the reference in the write-up. Imam Khomeini said, "In truth, nothing else is expected of the authentic scholars of Islam and of Shiism, except that in calling to the truth and on the bloodied road of the people's struggle, they should themselves give the first of the sacrifices, and that the closing seal upon their ledger should be martyrdom." The first of the sacrifices, not the last, and certainly not exempt. And the seminaries did not send their students to watch. They buried a great many of their own, and their names are still known and well known throughout the entire seminaries and the madrasas that they studied in. There is one more thing, and I don't want to let it slip past you. It was not only the men, and they did not all go to fight. Some went so that the fighting would stay clean. Some went so that the wounded could be tended to. Scholars and students, and women amongst them, went to the front lines to make certain that the soldiers knew the law of war, that they were looked after and healed when they were injured. But more importantly, within the law of war, they knew what may be struck and what may never be struck. What is done with a prisoner? Where is the limit? The tending to an injured prisoner. Where the limit is, and that the limit is not moved just because you're winning or just because you're losing. Their job was to stop an army becoming the thing that it was fighting. That is the Taifa standing guard in the other direction. And there is no version of it that involves a holy class in a safe room at a distance. So now the third step, and this is the one I've been waiting to give you. Al-Qurtubi is a jurist of the Maliki school of Cordoba in Muslim Spain, who was driven out of it and wrote his great commentary in Upper Egypt in the 7th century of the Hijrah. He comes to this verse, and on this verse of all verses, he reaches for the Prophet. He says, and you can find the reference in the write-up, "A ta'ifa of my community will not cease to be manifest upon the truth. Those who abandon them will not harm them until the command of God comes, and they are still so." There is a promise in this religion that a portion of this community will always be standing on the truth. Always. Whatever happens to the rest of it. And that promise is not our private property. It is not in our books alone. It is in the likes of Sahih Muslim, in a chapter whose title is the very hadith itself. But Al-Qurtubi does something more than just quote it. And this is the moment I want you to catch. He goes to a longer report in the same collection, one in which two things the Prophet said sit inside a single sentence. The first half is about being given understanding in religion, and the second half is the promise of the enduring band. He writes, and you can find the references, of course, in the write-up, whoever God wishes good for, he gives him understanding in the religion. And a band of the Muslims will not cease to fight upon the truth manifest over those who oppose them until the day of resurrection. And then he makes one observation about this. And the apparent sense of this sequence is that its beginning is connected to its end. Like I said, you can find all the references in the write-up. So let me say plainly what he's arguing, and let me be careful to say that it's an argument and not a fact. He's saying, do not read that as two separate sayings that happen to have been recorded together. Read it as a single movement. The beginning of it is connected to the end, which means the ones who are given understanding in religion are that enduring band. The promise that a portion of this community will always be standing on the truth is a promise about the people who go out and learn. That is his reading. That is Qurtubi's reading, and I want you to hold it as his and not as mine. And one more caution, because somebody here will go and check, and they should. The report in Sahih Bukhari that joins these two halves, the one narrated from Muawiyah of all people, does not say Taifa at all. It says this nation, meaning the whole community. And I'm not going to go and discuss what the difference becomes in meaning, but I think it should be self-evident. The word Taifa is in the other reports. So this is a mufassir, an exegetist, putting texts side by side and drawing a conclusion. It's not a single sentence handed down whole. I would much rather you heard that from me than found out on your own. But now sit for a second with what has just happened. A Maliki jurist driven out of Cordoba, working in Upper Egypt, reading a Sunni collection of hadith, arrives at the theology of the Hawza. And he arrives at it while disagreeing with us about what the verse means. That is not a Shia argument. That is the argument sitting in their books made by their scholars, and we didn't have to reach for it. And then he used it himself. The last step. Because there is one more layer. In the classical literature of the school, a ta'ifa with the definite article, the, al, unqualified, no adjective, means us. When a jurist writes ijma' al-ta'ifa, the consensus of the ta'ifa, everyone knows exactly which group is meant. It was the word the community used for itself from the inside, and he, Shaykh al-Tusi, used it. Here he is in his own book, in his own voice. You can find the reference in the write-up. He says, moreover, that which is well known, in which there is no doubt among the Taifa, is that the Imamah is not in two brothers after Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon them both. He used the word for his own community, and then his community used it for him. Now, I went looking for the first man to do that, for the first person to write Shaykh al-Taifa down and mean Shaykh al-Tusi by it. And I want to tell you honestly that I couldn't find it. There is no decree, there is no year that you can point to. Nobody stood up in a mosque in Najaf and announced it. It simply appeared in the biographical dictionaries, being used as though everybody already knew. Now, I thought that was a failure of my research, but on reflection, I've decided that that is the point. A title given by a committee is an award. A title that simply accretes over generations because nobody can think of anything else to say, that's a different kind of thing entirely. So here is where we have got to. Every scholar in this tradition is a sheikh. Many of them are a sheikh of a school or a city or a generation. We have met several already in this series, and we will meet more. One man in 1,000 years is called the sheikh of the Taifa. Not of a faction, not of a party, not of a sect, regardless of what the Orientalist books will tell you. Of the portion that goes around the house, of the ones who went out to understand and came back to warn, of the group that stands guard, facing the wrong way, holding weapons, while the rest of us pray. And by the end of tonight, you will know exactly why it was him. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move on to the long apprenticeship, 28 years as a student.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So Ramadan, 385 years of the Hijri calendar. Tus in Khurasan. Now perhaps Khurasan is not a place many of us can picture. So let me try and put it in your hands. Take a map of the Muslim world in the 4th century of the Hijrah. Find Baghdad in the middle of it, one of the great cities of the world, the seat of the Caliphate, the place where the money and the books and the arguments are. Now go east and keep going. Past Ray, the southern part of modern-day Tehran, past Nishapur, out where the Persian world runs into the steppe and the caravan roads come down out of Central Asia. That is Khurasan. And Tus is a town in it. And it's not a backwater. I don't want to give you that impression. Khurasan in that century was producing extraordinary people, and it was also the burial place of Imam al-Rida. But Khurasan is the place that's producing at that time, it's the country of Ferdowsi, and it would give us the likes of Al-Ghazali within a lifetime. And 200 years later, Khwaja Nasir ad-Din Tusi, another al-Tusi that we will come to in forthcoming sessions. But it was a very long way from the center. And everybody who lived there knew it, and every ambitious young man in Khurasan grew up knowing that the road to anything ran west. He was born there in the month of Ramadan, in a family we know almost nothing about. And that's worth pausing on for a moment. We have no story of his childhood, no account of a precocious boy astonishing his teachers, no dream his mother had before he was born, no miracle at the cradle. Our tradition loves these stories, and it did not produce such for him. What we have instead is a birth date and a town. The record of this man begins the day he started working. Now it's 408 of the Hijrah, and he is 23 years old, and he leaves Tus. One account has it that he came west by the obvious road, up through Nishapur, then Ray, then down to Qom, and from Qom to Baghdad. I say one account has it because that is exactly what it is, a singular report, and I've not been able to corroborate it anywhere else, and I would rather tell you than draw you a map that I can't defend. But the arrival we don't have to guess about, because he tells us himself. 39 years later, deep inside one of his own books, he writes the following. You can find the reference in the write-up. From the time of my entering Baghdad, which is the year 408. So we're not estimating. We're not reconstructing from later biographies. He wrote it down in the first person in his own book. And of course, that book is Kitab al-Ghaiba, which we'll come to, the book of the occultation, which we'll come to later. 408 of the Hijrah. Hold on to that sentence. There's more of it, and we come back to it in the third point tonight. And when we do, it will be the strongest thing that I say this evening. For now, just the young man upon the road. 23, coming out of Khurasan into one of the great cities of the world, carrying whatever a student carried, arriving in a city of hundreds of thousands of people where nobody was waiting for him, and going to find one particular teacher. That teacher was Shaykh al-Mufid. We met him in session 66, and I'm not going to re-narrate him. But hold three things. He was the most formidable theologian this school had produced up to that point. His house in Baghdad was a destination for scholars of every school in the city, and he was by then an old man. Sheikh al-Tusi studied with him for 5 years. 5. That's all he got. Because on the eve of Friday, 3 nights into the month of Ramadan in the year 413 of the Hijrah, Shaykh al-Mufid died. And the young man from Khurasan, now 28, buried his teacher and stayed. The man who took over the circle was Sayyid Murtada, sometimes known as Sharif Murtada, Shaykh al-Mufid's own student, a descendant of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, a jurist and a poet, and the brother of the man who compiled Nahj al-Balagha. We covered him and his brother in previous sessions. And Shaykh al-Tusi sat down in front of him for 23 years, until with 5 nights remaining in the month of Rabi al-Awwal, in the calendar year 436 of the Hijrah, Sayyid Murtada also passed away. So now do the math with me, because this is the point of the whole section. 5 and then 23. 28 years. He arrived in Baghdad at 23 years old, and he was 50 before there was nobody left in the room above him. And there's a detail in the biographies about the second stretch that I did not expect to find. And I want to give it to you because it changes the texture of everything. We have covered it briefly, but the detail's interesting. Sayyid Murtada or Sharif Murtada paid Shaykh al-Tusi every month a stipend, 12 dinar. And the biographers record, this is the part that made me stop and think, who else was on the payroll? Ibn al-Baraj, the same man I mentioned a few minutes ago, who ends up as the judge in Tripoli on the Mediterranean coast, running a community of his own. He was in that room too, and he was getting, according to some accounts, 8. Shaykh Tusi was getting 12. Now, I should be honest with you twice over here. The sources argue about the coin. One page says 12 dirhams, 2 say 12 dinars, and a dinar reading is the one the standard biographies carry. And they argue about the comparison. One report gives us 12 against 8, and another simply says that 12 was what was paid to all the students. Either way, the thing underneath does not move. But do not let the money be the point. The point is under the money. Somebody had decided that a student should not have to choose between learning and eating. That is not charity. Charity is what you give someone because you feel sorry for them. This is something else. This is a man with money in a seminary looking at a 28-year-old and making a judgment about the next 40 years, and then putting his hand in his pocket every month for 23 of those years. We're going to come back to this. In session 76, when we finally sit down and ask what a Hawza actually is, we're going to talk about Homs and about the Shahriya, the monthly stipend that keeps students at seminaries in Najaf and Qom to this day fed and clothed for more than 1,000 years later. That system has a beginning, and we've just spoken about it. So now it's 436 of the Hijrah. Said Murtada has passed away, and Shaykh al-Tusi is 50 years old, and everything is his. The seminary, the Dar al-Ilm, the house of knowledge with all of its library, the students, the correspondence, the network that ran west through Syria to the coast, Ibn al-Baraj in Tripoli, Salar in Aleppo, Abu Salah in Greater Syria, all of this is his. All of them look to Baghdad. The responsibility has fallen on Shaykh Tusi. And then the chair of theology from the Khalif al-Qa'im bi Amrillah himself. Around 300 students in his circle at its height. And I give you that number as an order of magnitude, not as an actual register, because nobody was really keeping an attendance list, and anyone who tells you they know the exact figure is frankly selling you something. That is the position. That is what he inherited, and it took him 28 years to get there. So now let's look at a couple of lessons for our times. 3 things, and they all come out of that number. The first is the number itself. 28 years as a student. 5 under one master, 23 under another, in the same room, in the same city, with the same books. He was not Shaykh al-Taifa at 30. He was not Shaykh al-Taifa at 40. At 40, he was a distinguished student, and the man teaching him was still alive, and he still sat where the students sat. I want you to feel the distance between that and the world our children are growing up in. Our age has built machinery that will hand a 19-year-old a platform and a 25-year-old an authority, and it will do it before either of them has read anything all the way through. And the machinery is not evil per se, it is just fast. And speed is the only virtue, if it can be called a virtue, that it has. So the question is not, why doesn't anyone study for 28 years anymore? People do. The question is far sharper than that, and it is for the person who has already started. What does it mean to sit for 23 years in the same room in front of the same teacher and still, at 50, call yourself a student? The second is the money, and I want to be very careful here because this is the most misusable thing that I will say to you tonight. That stipend has a name. It is called the Shahriyya, the monthly, and it did not stop in the 11th century, as we've said. It is paid in Najaf and Qom to this month, to students sitting in rooms exactly like the one Shaykh al-Tusi sat in. And here is the thing almost everybody gets wrong about it. It is not a rich man's gift. It does not come out of a patron's pocket as a favor. It comes out of the obligatory giving of ordinary believers, and principally out of the Sahm Imam, the Imam's own portion of the Khums, which we will be discussing in future sessions. Which means the money is not the donor's money by the time that it arrives. It is a trust held on behalf of the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, and passed on through the hands of a marja and his office. Now hold on to that because everything turns on it. The man who hands the money over is a courier. He is not a paymaster. He cannot buy anything with it because it was never his. And that is exactly what one of my teachers meant when he told me many, many years ago, when you enter the Hawza, you enter the employ of the Imam of our age. Not the employ of a committee, not the employ of whoever paid for the carpet. So the Shahriyya exists for one purpose, and the purpose is not comfort. It exists to make a scholar free. Free of the need to please anyone. Free to say the thing that will not be popular. Free to answer the question that has no comfortable answer. And when it stops doing that, it has failed. And the honest teachers know it. I know of a student in our own age who agreed with his mentor about everything, every opinion, every ruling, all of the time. To his face, always yes. Behind his back, doubts, disagreements. And one month, his Shahriyya from his teacher stopped. He became confused and he went and asked why, and his teacher said to him the following: because when I say something wrong, you don't correct me. This money is turning you into a hypocrite where I'm concerned. Meaning this money is creating an obligation on you, which makes you think you have to be a yes man. You have to agree with everything I say. Therefore, I'm taking it away. Perhaps then you'll be able to push back against me and actually discuss. Sit down and reflect upon that. A teacher withdrew a man's shahriyah in order to restore his honesty. That's what this is for. That is the whole institution in a single sentence. And the Quran gives you a test you can carry out of this room tonight and use for the rest of your life. And it's one line long. In Quran, Surah Yasin, the chapter of Yasin, 36th chapter of the Quran, verse number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Follow those who ask of you no wage and who are rightly guided." And notice who is speaking. You can go to Quran, look at this. This was spoken not by a prophet. Rather, it is a man who came from the far side of the city, an ordinary believer with no name or no title explicitly defined. And the test he hands his people is not, follow the guided ones, and by the way, they take no fee. The two are joined. The absence of the fee is offered as part of the evidence of the guidance. And now I have to say the hard part. And I'm going to say it plainly because I've sat in my own front room with people this has been done to. There are places, perhaps not here, but not far from here either, where the whole thing has been turned upside down. Where a speaker is booked for sums of money that would keep a family for a year or potentially more. Where a centre then goes to its congregation and asks households for a figure, £72 a head, £96 a head, £313 a head, or whichever number has been deemed to sound holy this year. And where the asking is done in such a way that a man who cannot afford it cannot say so out loud. And I've seen what that does. I've sat with men who work 2, sometimes 3 jobs, and who have gone to lenders no bank would let them near, and borrowed at interest rate that you would not believe me if I said them, so that they could pay what they had been told their love for Imam al-Hussein required. Listen to what God says about preachers who put people in that position. This is Quran, Surah Al-Qalam, the chapter of the pen, 68th chapter of the Quran, verse number 46. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Or do you ask of them a wage so that they are weighed down with debt?" The word used is maghram, debt. God raises the only kind of reason that would excuse a man for turning away. You must be charging them and they must be in debt because of it, and then rules it out because the Prophet asks for nothing, which tells you exactly what it means when the charge is true. 1400 years ago, and it names a loan taken out last year at an interest rate no one should ever have been offered. So let me say 3 things as clearly as I know how to. God needs nothing from you. Not your money, not your meat, not your blood. In Quran, Surah Al-Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage, 22nd chapter of the Quran, verse 37, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Their flesh will not reach God, nor their blood, but what reaches him is the God consciousness from you." That is said about the sacrifice at the Hajj, the single most expensive act of devotion in the religion. And that itself is a problem. The animal does not reach God. Only what was in you when you gave it. And Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, needs nothing from you. He needed nothing at Karbala. He certainly needs nothing from a man in any part of the world with 2, 3 jobs and children to feed. If anyone ever tells you otherwise, irrespective of how big a turban he might be wearing, however grand his title, you're hearing something that God has already answered. In Quran, Surah Aal-e-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, 3rd chapter of the Quran, verse 181, God says, "God has certainly heard the saying of those who said, 'God is poor and we are rich.'" And third, the giving itself is not a tax. It is a ta'awun. Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, 2nd verse. and cooperate with one another in righteousness and God consciousness, and do not cooperate with one another in sin and aggression. Ta'awun being cooperation. Feel both halves of that verse. Because if giving to keep a scholar free is ta'awun, is cooperation upon righteousness, and it is, then giving to a man who will use it to keep his mouth shut is cooperation in the other thing. Money handed over to buy silence is not charity. It has changed category. And the Imams put the mutual duty in language that nobody can misread. Imam al-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, has said, and you can find the reference in the write-up, the Muslim is the brother of the Muslim, and it is a duty upon the Muslims to strive in keeping bonds and to cooperate in compassion and to share what they have with the people of need. Sharing with the people of need. That is the direction the money is supposed to run in a healthy community. Toward the person who is struggling, not out of his pocket and into an envelope to pay some random scholar or so-called scholar. Imam al-Baqir, peace and blessings be upon him, once put it as a question to one of his followers. Again, you can find the references all in the write-up. Does one of you go to his brother, put his hand into his purse and take what he needs, and the other one does not push him away? His companions told him, we do not know of that amongst us. And so Imam Baqir said, then you have nothing. I'll tell you honestly that our scholars do not rate the report's chain among the strongest. I give it to you for the standard the Imam is setting, not to settle a ruling. So what do you give? If God has given you the means, give, and give generously, properly, carefully, responsibly, and give to what makes a scholar free, rather than what makes him comfortable, and ask him afterwards what your money bought. And if God has not given you the means, then hear me. Your contribution is not smaller. It is arguably the more important half. You pray for him. You ask him hard questions and you make him work. Because a scholar who is never questioned rots. And a congregation that never asks has already agreed to be managed and manipulated. You carry what he teaches out of the room and into your house and into your workplace and to your colleagues and friends. And when somebody tells you that God or the Imam needs your money, you don't believe that person. That is how you keep a scholar free. Not by paying more, by needing him to be honest and letting him see that you need him to be honest. We'll come back to all of this properly and in some detail, what a Hawza actually is, where the khums goes, how a scholar is made and how one is ruined. That is session 76. And I promised you that night, on the 13th night of the Shahada series, the third night of our Arba'een sessions, and I haven't forgotten. And the third is a word, nafara. Go back to the verse. Why should not a Taifa of every group go forth? Nafara. Nafara means he went out, he left. He got up from where he was sitting and he went. The boy who left Tus at 23 and went west and did not come back was doing the thing that the verse describes. Nobody had thought to call him by its word yet. He was just a young man on a road. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the next point.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
So I could stand here and read you a list of his books. I would rather somebody else did it. There was a man in Baghdad called Ahmed ibn Ali al-Najashi. He sat in the same circles, he studied under the same teacher, Shaykh al-Mufid, at the same time. He was, as far as we can tell, a contemporary and something like you could say a colleague. And he was compiling a biographical dictionary of the scholars of this school. And he came to the entry for Shaykh al-Tusi and he wrote the following. You can find the reference in the write-up. He wrote, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan ibn Ali al-Tusi, Abu Ja'far, distinguished from our companions, trustworthy, eminent, one of the students of our Shaykh Abu Abdullah. He has books among them, the book of the refinement of the rulings, and it is a large book, and the book of reflection, and the book of the apparatus of the principles of jurisprudence, and the book of men, those who narrated from the Prophet and from the Imams, and the book of the catalogue of the books of the Shia and the names of the authors, and the book of the extensive work in jurisprudence, the book of the elucidation in the exegesis of the Quran. Read it slowly and let those titles fall. And I'm going to say them in Arabic now and we'll go through them. تهذيب الأحكام, الاستبصار, عدة العصول, الرجال, الفهرست, المبسوط, التبيان. And note who is speaking. This is not a devotee 3 or 4 centuries later polishing a legend. This is a man who sat in the same room. He says, our Shaykh Abu Abdullah, that Shaykh al-Mufid. He's saying, he and I had the same teacher. Jalil, thiqa, ayn, distinguished, trustworthy, eminent. And those are technical words, by the way. In this science, they are like grades, not just compliments. Thiqa means you may rely on what this person transmits. And then a colleague writing in the same city in the same lifetime simply lists what the man has produced. And the list is a library. Take the first two. Tahzib al-Ahkam, the refinement of the rulings. It began as a commentary on his own teacher's book, Shaykh al-Mufid's Al-Muqni', and it grew into something else entirely. Roughly 13,500 narrations, and it is the book with the ring in it. The ring, the hadith that we mentioned earlier. The sentence I had read to you at the beginning of the evening about your right hand, it's in there, it's in Tahdib. Then you have Al-Istibsar, the reflection. Around 5,500 narrations, and this one is stranger, and I want you to sit with what it's for. He did not compile it to collect the reports that agreed with each other. He compiled it to collect the ones that fought. That is its stated purpose. Reports that appear to contradict one another, where one narration says this and another narration says that, and both are in our books, and a jurist trying to derive a ruling has to do something about it. He gathered them, and then he spent an entire book working out what to do. Sit with that. That is not the behavior of a man building a case. A man building a case buries the contradictions. That is the behavior of a man building a discipline. Someone who has decided that the difficulties belong in the open, catalogued with his name upon the cover. Now go back to session 63. Shaykh al-Kulaini gave us al-Kafi. Shaykh al-Saduq gave us Man la yahdharuhu al-Faqih. There are 4 foundational books of hadith in this school, as we've said. 4 books that every jurist in this tradition for 1,000 years has had to work with before they can open their mouth and issue rulings. 2 of them are the work of this one man. And now the third one, and this is where the pattern starts. At-Tibyan fi Tafsir al-Quran, the elucidation, 10 volumes of commentary on the Quran. And here is how it opens. And the reference, of course, is in the write-up. Sheikh al-Tusi writes, to proceed, what prompted me to begin the work of this book was that I did not find anyone among our companions, early or late, who had produced a book containing an exegesis of the whole Quran and encompassing the various branches of its meaning. 3 words in there, and I don't want you to walk straight past them. Early or late, ancient and modern. He did not assume nobody had done it. He looked backwards through everything the school had produced since the time of the Imams, peace and blessings be upon them, and forwards through everything his own generation was writing, and he came up empty. 400 years of scholarship in this school and not one complete commentary or tafsir on the Quran. Nobody commissioned this book. Nobody was complaining about the gap. Nobody had noticed there was a gap. That is what a gap is. He noticed, and then he filled it, and it took him 10 volumes. Now the 4th. And for this one, you need to hear what was being said about us, meaning the Shia. This book is known as Al-Mabsut, the extensive work. 8 volumes of jurisprudence. And in the preface, he does something scholars almost never do. He tells you exactly what was said to him in the words in which it was said. You can find the reference in the write-up. Shaykh al-Tusi writes, "To proceed, I do not cease to hear our opponents, among those affiliated with the science of the branches, ascribing to the jurisprudence of our Imami companions a paucity of branches and of questions, and they say, they are a people of padding and contradiction, and that whoever rejects analogy and independent reasoning has no path to a multiplicity of questions, nor to branching them out." That's not one insult, count them. Number one, you have very little, قلة الفروع, a paucity of branches. Your jurisprudence is thin, there simply is not much of it. Two, what you have is padding and it contradicts itself. That is the sharpest of the three, and it is the one that would have hurt. It is not saying that you're wrong, it's saying you're not serious. You have filler where argument should be, and where you do have arguments, they do not agree with each other. Three, and you could not have more because you've refused the tools. You reject qiyas, analogy, we've discussed this previously. You reject ijtihad as they understood it. So of course you have nothing, you have thrown away the instruments that produce something. And now look at the first four words of that passage. I do not cease to hear it. Not, I once heard, or it has been said. I do not cease to hear it. This is how the weather was where he lived. Decades of it, in the mosques and in the markets and the debating circles of Baghdad, from men who were his neighbors. So what does he do? He does not write a letter to the editor. He does not write a defense or a rebuttal or a treatise on why the insult is unfair. He writes 8 volumes of jurisprudence and he puts them on the table. And there is a lesson sitting in that which I do not want to over-explain, so I will say it once. The answer to "you have nothing" is never "yes, we do." The answer is a shelf. But al-Mabsut is not the remarkable one. It is remarkable, but it's not the remarkable one. This one is Al-Khilaf, the book of disagreement. Comparative jurisprudence, running the positions of all the schools side by side, question by question. Think about what that book required of the man who wrote it. To produce it, he had to know, for example, the Hanafi position, not a caricature of it, the actual position with its reasoning, and the Maliki, and the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali. Of course, these are the 4 schools of our brothers of the Sunnah. 4 schools that he disagreed with in their own terms, with their own arguments, well enough that a Hanafi jurist could pick up the book and read his own school's case and say, yes, that is what we hold, and that is why we hold it. He had to be able to state the argument of the man across the room better than most of that man's own students could. That is the standard. And I want to be transparent with you because I would rather you knew. It is also the method I'm trying within this series. In a few weeks, we're going to arrive at the sharpest objection our tradition faces. The accusation that what we do at the shrines is idol worship. And when we get there, I'm going to put that objection in front of you at full strength in its best form, with its best evidence, before I say a single word in answer to it. Not the weak version, not the version that's easy to knock over. We did not invent this method, we learnt it from him, from Shaykh al-Tusi. 2 more books, and then a third thing that turns out to be the same thing. You have Al-Rijal, the Book of Men, and Al-Fihris, the catalogue. So what are they? They are books about the people who transmitted the reports. Who is this man? When did he live? Who did he study with? Is he reliable? If he's not, why not? And who says so? Stop and consider what kind of mind produces this. Here is a religion that runs on transmitted reports. Somebody said something, somebody else wrote it down, it came down a chain of hands for 400 years, and it arrived in your book. And this man's response to that situation is to build an entire science whose only subject is, how do we know if we can trust this? Not, here is the truth, but rather, here is the machinery by which we test claims to truth. And here is what it says about every single link in the chain, including the links we would rather it did not. That is peer review, centuries before anybody in the world had had the phrase. And that is why approximately an hour ago I was able to stand here and tell you that the hadith about your right hand comes to us mursal, with a gap in the chain. I could tell you that because he, Shaykh al-Tusi, built the tools that let me see the gap. He gave us the instrument that we use to audit him. Please give me a salawat, and then we move to the third book nobody had written.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Now the last one in this set, Uddat al-Usul, the apparatus, his work on the principles of jurisprudence, the theory underneath the law, what counts as evidence, how you reason from a text, what to do when two sound sources point in different ways. And in its preface, he does the same thing that he did in Al-Mabsut. He tells you what was said to him, except this time it's not an insult, it is a request. He writes, and you can find the reference in the write-up. And you said, this is a discipline of knowledge which must be attended to with the utmost seriousness, because the whole of the Sharia is built upon it, and knowledge of none of it is complete without mastering its principles. And whoever does not master its principles is merely a reciter and an imitator, and is not a scholar. And I am answering you in what you have asked. I want to be precise about who is speaking there, because it will be very easy to get it wrong, and I have seen it gotten wrong. This is not Shaykh al-Tusi. This is not Shaykh al-Tusi announcing the importance of his own subject. Look at the first word, وَقُلْتُمْ, and you said. He is quoting the people who came to him. He's putting their words in the mouth they came out of. And then he says, fine, I will answer, which is better. Because it means what you're hearing is not a scholar advertising. It is a community walking up to a man and telling him what it lacks. Nobody has written this, and without it we are reciters and imitators and not scholars. And he says, I'm answering you in what you have asked. So now I want you to stop. Go back over the last 20 or so minutes and look at what's actually happened. At Tibyan, I did not find anyone who had produced a book containing an exegesis of the whole Quran. Al-Mabsut, they say we have a paucity of branches and that we do not have more. Uddat al-Usul, you said nobody has written this and without it we're imitators. 3 books, 3 prefaces, the same kind of sentence underneath all of them in slightly different keys. He wrote the books that were missing, not the books he wanted to write. Not the books that would have been easiest or the most admired or most his own. He went looking for the holes in the tafsir, in the fiqh, in the theory underneath the fiqh, in the science of those who can be trusted, and he filled them one after another for 40 years and more. There is a kind of person who asks, what do I want to build? And there is a kind of person who asks, what is missing? And they don't produce the same life. So what are the lessons for our time in this? The first, how a community answers contempt. He was told his tradition was thin, padded and self-contradictory, and he answered with jurisprudence rather than with grievance. I do not think that is only a lesson about scholarship. Our community has been told a great many things about itself, in this country and elsewhere. And there is always a choice about how to answer. And the loudest option is almost never the one that lasts. Nobody now reads what those men said about us in the markets of Baghdad. Everybody who studies the law still opens Al-Mabsut. Second, Al-Khilaf is the harder book. Anyone can make their own case. Making your opponent's case accurately in a book with your name on the cover, and doing it so well that your opponent recognizes himself in your pages, that is an entirely different order of things. It requires you to have actually listened. And the reason most of us cannot do it is not that we lack the ability. It is that somewhere along the way we decided we already knew what the other person was going to say. And third, go back to the verse, that they may gain deep understanding in religion. Allama told us that this word means the whole of it, roots and branches, not just a single specialty. Now look at the list one more time. Hadith twice, Quranic commentary, jurisprudence, comparative jurisprudence, legal theory, biographical evaluation, theology, the occultation. That is not a man with a career. That is a man carrying out an instruction. Please give me a loud salawat and we move to the final point, which is the book about waiting, written while the city fell.
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
I told you at the start of the first point to hold on to a sentence and that we would come back to it. Here's the rest of it. Sits deep inside Kitab al-Ghaiba, the book of the occultation, in a passage where Shaykh al-Tusi is discussing where a particular grave is. And in the middle of a technical discussion, he stops being an author and becomes a man. And he says, and you can find the reference in the write-up, said Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, the author of this book, I saw his grave in the place which he mentioned, and we used to go in to him and visit him month by month. And so it was from the time of my entering Baghdad, which is in the year 408, until the year 430 something, and it is to this day of ours, and that is the year 447 as it was. Let's take that apart. Said Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, the author of this book. He signs his own name inside his own book in the third person. The way a man does when he wants you to know that this next part is not transmitted from anybody. It is his. He saw it. He was there. 408, the year he arrived. 447, the year that he is writing. 39 years in one sentence in his own hand. And what is he telling you he did with them? Month by month, every month, for 39 years, this man went to visit a grave. Not once, not just on anniversaries, not when there was a crowd going. Monthly, from the year he arrived in the city as a 23-year-old until the year he was 62 and everything was about to be taken from him. Now, I told you at the start of this evening that I was not going to explain Najaf tonight, and I'm not going to. That's in session 71. And I want you to arrive there with the question still sharp. But hold this one thing. The man who ended his life living beside a grave in the desert had been walking across Baghdad to stand at a grave every month for 39 years first. That's all I'm going to say. Take it home with yourselves. Now, the book that sentence is sitting in, Kitab al-Ghaiba, the book of the occultation. This is the foundational early work of our tradition on the absence of the Imam of our age. May our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. Why is he absent? Why is he absent? What is the absence for? Why has it gone on so long? What it means to live inside it. And because he was a working scholar and not just a preacher, every objection that anybody had ever raised about the whole idea, set out and answered. Now, before I read you the opening, one correction. You will hear it said, and you will read it in perfectly respectable places, that he dated the book in his preface. He did not. The preface tells you the conditions. The date appears twice later inside the book, inside the body of the book, in the middle of the arguments. The way a man mentions the year when he needs it for a calculation and is not thinking about posterity, which is better when you think about it. It means he was still writing when the year turned. He did not sit down and inscribe 447 at the top of a page as a monument. He was in the middle of a sentence and the year came up. Here is the preface. You can find the reference in the write-up. And I am answering what he asked and complying with what he laid down, despite the narrowness of the time and the dishevelment of thought, the obstacles of the age and the distractions of calamity. 4 conditions. Let's take them one at a time because he chose them one at a time. First of all, you have dhiq al-waqt, the narrowness of the time. Not I was busy. Dhiq is a word you use for a space that has closed in on you. The time itself had gotten tight around him. Then you have shath al-fikr, the dishevelment of thought. Shath is what you say about hair that has not been combed, about a house that has not been kept, a mind that will not lie flat, a mind with things blowing through it. Then you have awa'iq al-zaman, the obstacles of the age, the things outside him that were in the way. And then you have sawarif al-hadathan, the distractions of calamity, hadathan, the blows that time deals out, the things that happen to you. Now hear the whole of it together. A man wrote the foundational book of this tradition on the absence of the Imam of our age with an uncombed mind in a narrow hour in a city that was coming apart around him. And then he apologized for it. He apologized in the preface. He is telling his patron, this is not my best work. I did not have the conditions. Forgive the state of it. That book is 1,000 years old and we are still reading and studying it. I do not know what to do with that except to say it plainly. Some of the most important things any of us will ever do or make will be made badly in a bad year with an uncombed mind, and we will apologize for them, and yet they will outlive us. But the real question about the book is not how he wrote it, it is why then. Why does a man write a book about the absence of the Imam while his city is literally being taken apart? He had lived through the good years, nearly 40 of them. He had the chair of theology, 300 students, a library, the ear of the Khalif himself. He could have written this book at any point in the 2 decades of relative stability. He wrote it in 447. And I think the answer is not that he chose the moment. I think the moment chose him, because that is when the question gets asked. Nobody asks where God's proof is when the harvest is good. Nobody sits in a comfortable house in a functioning city with the children fed and the streets safe and says, where is he? Why has he not come? What is the absence for? Those questions do not arrive in the easy years. They arrive when the roof comes off, when the sky falls down. They arrive in the hospital corridor. They arrive when the phone rings at 4 in the morning. They arrive when you watch on a screen in your own living room of people being destroyed while the world explains why nothing can be done and something in you says, where is he? That is not a weakness in the question. It is the nature of the question. The absence is only ever felt as an absence when you need the presence. Now this is a shortcoming in us. We should always need the presence. But this is the general rule. And so a book about waiting gets written by a man who is running out of time in a city he is about to lose, because that is the only condition under which anybody actually wants to know the answer. And here is what I find most unbearable about the timing. He had been visiting a grave every month for 39 years, standing in front of somebody who was there but not there, practicing without knowing he was practicing the exact discipline that the book is about. He was, as it turns out, the right man to write it. So now we come to the month of Ramadan in 447 of the Hijrah, which is around December of the year 1055, before the Roman invasion of the UK. Tughril Beg enters Baghdad. He was, of course, the Seljuk Emir. He does not fight his way in. He is invited by the Khalif al-Qa'im bi-Amrillah himself, the same Khalif who gave Shaykh al-Tusi the chair. Invited in against the Buyid Amir al-Malik al-Rahim, whose family had held the real power in Baghdad for over a century, as we had discussed in our previous sessions. I'm not going to introduce the Seljuks to you tonight. Who they were, where they came from, what they wanted, and what happened to the city because of them, that's for next week, God willing, and it deserves its proper time. Tonight I only want you to see the picture. A quarter of Baghdad called Karkh, a house in it, an old man of around 62, who came to this city 40 years ago from a town in Khorasan, and who has spent every month of those 40 years walking to a grave and back. On the table in front of him, a finished manuscript about waiting, and outside in the streets, a new army. And now the last lesson for our time for this session. First, he wrote about absence while he was losing everything, which is the only condition under which a book about absence is worth reading. Anybody can write about patience in a good year. Nobody needs it. The second, and hold on to this one lightly, because next week it becomes the whole evening. The manuscript outlived the house. What is written into a book and what is written into other people is simply not the same category of thing as what is kept in a building. A building can be taken from you in an afternoon. We will watch what happens next Wednesday. And third, the verse one last time, and to warn their people when they return to them. That is the second half of the assignment. The Taifa goes out, learns, and comes back. He never went back. He left Tus at 23 and he never saw Khorasan again. He died beside a grave in the Iraqi desert more than 1,000 miles the other way. So the warning traveled instead. Down the road to Najaf in a saddlebag and out from there, to Tripoli, to Aleppo, to Syria, to Persia, to India, across 1,000 years and more than 5,000 miles. And it reached this very room. We are his people, and he is still coming back to us. And the conclusion and key takeaways from tonight. So 3 things to take home. Number 1, authority is a function of time spent under instruction. 28 years, 5 and then 23. He was 50 before there was nobody left in the room above him. And the community that eventually gave him its own name did not give it to him until he had spent his whole life earning it for everybody else. 2, a community answers contempt by building, not by arguing. They said our jurisprudence was thin and padded and self-contradictory. He wrote 8 volumes. Nobody now reads the insult. Everybody still opens the answer. 3, the work that survives an empire is the work that was already inside other people. We will find out next week exactly how true that is and what it costs. And then the title, which is where we started. He went out to understand and he came back to warn. He stood guard, facing the other way, holding a weapon so that the rest could pray. That is the Taifa of the verse. And he did it so completely for so long in so many directions at once that a community simply stopped looking for another word. Next week, they come for the house. Please give me a salawat. We have a short eulogy, then we have the Maqtal, then a short supplication, and then we'll end.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa al-Muhammad ajil.
So come back with me to the beginning, before the library, before the title, before the desert, 413 of the Hijrah. The eve of Friday, 3 nights into the month of Ramadan, the 30th of November in the year, around 1022. Sheikh al-Mufid dies in Baghdad. He's 76 years old. He has been the head of this school for a generation, and the man who leads the funeral prayer over him is his own student, Sayyid al-Sharif Murtada, a descendant of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, standing in front of the body of the man who taught him everything. They don't do it in a mosque. They do it in what is known as the Maidan al-Ushnan, the potash sellers' square, one of the open market squares of Baghdad, the kind of place built to hold a crowd. And his own student, Najashi, who was there in that city in that year, wrote, and you can find the reference in the write-up, and Sharif al-Murtada led the prayer over him, and it was too narrow for the people, wide as it was. 80,000, they say. And here I want to stop and tell you where this number comes from, because it matters more than the number does. It doesn't come from us. The earliest sources that carry it are the Sunni chronicles of Baghdad, the likes of Ibn al-Jawzi in al-Muntazam, under the events of the year 413 of the Hijrah. Ibn Kathir repeats it in his well-known Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. In our own books, get it from theirs. And Ibn Kathir, when he records it, adds a line of his own. He writes that 80,000 of the Rafida and the Shia followed the beer, and God gave us relief from him. Listen to that. The number our community repeats about our own teacher's funeral comes to us from men who did not like him. One of them stood in the city, counted the crowd, wrote the figure down, and then thanked God the man was dead. He still counted the crowd. That's why I believe the number. A friend might round up. Nobody in the history of the world has ever exaggerated the size of a funeral he was glad to see. They buried him in his own house. Years later, they moved into the Qurayshi cemetery, and he lies there now, among the graves of many of the Imams and the Imams that there's peace and blessings be upon him. Now, somewhere in that square, the Quraysh cemetery is Qadamiyya. Now, somewhere in that square, in that crowd, too big for it, there is a young man from Khurasan. He's 28 years old, and he's been in the city for 5 years. He came a very long way to sit in front of that man, and he got 5 years. And now he is standing in the market square in a crowd of strangers, watching his teacher, Shaykh al-Mufid, be carried out. He does not know yet that the man leading the prayer will teach him for 23 more years. He does not know that he will bury him too. He does not know that 35 years from now, he will be an old man on a road going south, and that he will be carrying a manuscript, and that people not yet born will call him by a name that is not his. He's just a young man in a crowd who has lost his teacher. And years later, decades later, when he came to write the catalogue of the scholars of this school, he reached the entry for Shaykh al-Mufid. And what he wrote was not an assessment. He writes, you can find the reference in the write-up, excellent of mind, subtle of perception, ready in reply. Hadir al-Jawab, ready in reply. The answer was always there. That is not biography. That is a man remembering what it was like to be in the room. That is what you write about somebody when you can still hear their voice. And both of them, the teacher who received the letters from behind the veil and the Sayyid of the house of the Prophet who prayed over him in the market square, both of them spent their lives on behalf of one man who was not there, the same one who is not here tonight. So now we have a short segue to the Maqtal, but before we do, let's look at what day this is. Before we hear this, I have to tell you what day this is. Tonight is the 28th of Safar. You already know what that means, but say it out loud with me anyway, because we have just spent some time on the machinery of this religion, and we should not close without naming the wound that exists to bind. On this day in the 11th year after Hijrah, which in the reckoning of the West is around, or the Common Era is around 632, the Messenger of God, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and his righteous companions, died in Medina. How he died and all of that, this is a separate discussion. He was buried where he died, not carried out to a cemetery, buried in the room he died in, inside the house, the first house beside a grave. That is the name of this run of sessions. And I want to be honest with you, I didn't plan that. The calendar did it. And on this same day, 39 years later, in the year 50 after Hijrah, his grandson, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, peace and blessings be upon him, was killed by poison in that same city. He asked for one thing as he was dying, to be buried near his grandfather. He didn't get it. The books record that when they carried the body towards the house, people came out with arrows to stop it. And that Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, who had been made to promise that not one drop of blood would be spilt over this funeral, kept the promise, turned the bier aside and buried him in Baqi. And that is not only in our books. Of course, Al-Mufid has it in Al-Irshad and Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani in Maqtal al-Talibiyyin. And also Ibn Abdul Hadid and Al-Mas'udi, they carry the same event too. Hold on to that cemetery, Al-Baqi. We will stand in it later in this series and look at what was done to it and at how a thing like that becomes possible. And at the end of this same month, we mark the martyrdom of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, the 8th Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, who was buried in a village called Sanabad on the edge of a city in Khurasan called Tus. Today we know it as Mashhad. Tus, the city this entire evening walked out of. Think about what that means. The boy we've been following all night grew up in the district that holds an Imam's grave. He left it. He spent 40 years in Baghdad, 5 at the feet of one teacher, 23 at the feet of a next. Then lost everything he owned, walked south and died beside a different grave, in a different desert with a school around him. Some men are born beside a grave and spend their lives learning what to do with one. Now, I've spent this whole session telling you that this religion survives because people wrote things down and refused to lose them. So let me tell you what happened 4 days before the Messenger of God died. And I'm going to tell it to you out of a book that is not ours, Sahih al-Bukhari. Ibn Abbas was a boy at the time. He lived another 57 years and he could not tell this story without weeping, al-Bukhari records, in the same report, that he wept until his tears wet the pebbles on the ground. He used to begin it in the same way every time. Thursday, and what is Thursday? And you can find the reference in the write-up. Thursday. The Prophet was in his last illness. According to other reports, he was poisoned, but will work with last illness. And he said to the men in that room, "Bring me a shoulder blade and I will write for you a writing after which you will never go astray." Again, you can find the reference from Sahih Bukhari in the write-up. A shoulder blade, a flat piece of bone scraped clean. That is what a man wrote on when there was nothing else. He asked for something to write on. There was an argument in the room about whether he should be given it. The voices rose, and he said, "Leave me," and nothing was written. I'm not going to spend the last minutes of tonight on who said what and why in that room. Everyone knows the argument, and it's documented in al-Bukhari anyway. This is not the lesson. That argument has had 1400 years, and it's not what tonight is for. The lesson is what the boy in the corner said about it for the rest of his life. That boy in the corner obviously being Ibn Abbas. He said, and you can find the reference in Sahih Bukhari, and the references in the write-up, the calamity, the whole calamity, was what came between the Messenger of God and his writing. The calamity, the whole calamity. Not a disaster, the whole of it. As though everything that went wrong afterwards had one address, and that was it. Now sit with that for a moment. On this night, in this session, the last thing the Prophet of God asked was for something to write on, and it did not come. Everything you have heard tonight is what happens next. Because from that Thursday onwards, this community had exactly one method available to it. Not a finished document handed down from a height. People keeping things by hand. A daughter kept it and was buried where nobody could find her. A grandson kept it and was refused a grave for his trouble. An aunt kept it, standing in a court in Damascus with her brother's head in front of her. And after them, 1,000 years of men in rooms with paper, a house in Karch, a tired old man in it, a folded letter he did not throw away, and a boy from Tus in the back of the room carrying other men's books, who would grow up to spend 50 years copying, checking, correcting and keeping, and who would die beside a grave in the desert with a school around him. Every single thing we have handled tonight, the hadith about the ring on the right hand, the book about the occultation, the prayer we are about to close with, is in this room because somebody wrote it down and somebody else refused to lose it. That is not a small administrative thing that scholars do in the background. That is repair. That is the whole Taifa. That is what the whole Taifa has been doing without stopping since the Thursday the bone never came. And that is why on the anniversary of the day the writing was refused, we are going to sit and listen to a letter that was kept. Before it begins, let me tell you honestly what you're about to hear, because you should never be in any doubt. This is not a reciter, it is not a person. It is a voice made for this series in clear English, belonging to no living man. An imagining of the voice of the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. Speaking from behind the veils of his absence, looking back across the years at people he was watching the whole time. It is a vessel for his words. It is nothing more than that, and we will not pretend it is anything more than that. And tonight of all nights, it is not just a device. We've spent an hour with a man who wrote a book about the absence of the Imam of our age. Tonight the Imam speaks. He speaks about 2 letters that come to a house in Baghdad. One in the month of Safar in the year 410 of the Hijrah, and one on Thursday in Dhul Hijjah in the year 412 of the Hijrah. Letters addressed to Shaykh al-Mufid by name, and one honest word before you hear it in a manner of things, everything else tonight. Those letters carry no chain. There is no line of transmitters to weigh. No, he told me from him, so on. All the text says is that the man who delivered the first one stated that he had brought it from a district adjoining Hijaz, and then he is never mentioned again. At-Tabarsi gives a full chain for the passage on the very next page of the same book. For these he had none, and he did not pretend otherwise. A letter with no chain, from a place not quite named, carried by a man nobody identifies, which is, when you think about it, very nearly what correspondence from behind a veil would have to look like. And in that house, at that time, 24-year-old, 2 years into his studies, there was a young man from Khurasan. Let us now listen to the Maqtal, the letters that he kept.
Tonight is the 28th of Safar. You know what that is? It is the day my grandfather died, the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him and upon his family. And it is the day they poisoned my uncle Hassan and would not let them lay him beside the man he had asked for, and came out with arrows to make sure of it. So forgive me, I am not going to begin where you expect. 4 days before the end, on a Thursday, my grandfather asked for something to write on. A shoulder blade, a flat piece of bone scraped clean, that is what a man wrote on when there was nothing else. He said, "Bring it to me, and I will write you a writing, and you will never go astray after it." There was an argument in the room. The bone never came. There was a boy in that room. He lived another 57 years and could not tell it without weeping. He used to begin it the same way every time. Thursday. And what is Thursday? Everything I am about to tell you happened because of what was not written down that day. There is a thing men do when they cannot come. They write. Not a message. A message is for the moment. I mean the other kind. The kind a man folds and keeps, that is still in the drawer after he is buried. And nobody knows what to do with it, and nobody throws it away. You have one somewhere. Understand, my beloved, what it costs to write one. It costs the admission that you are not coming. There was a house in Baghdad, in the quarter they called Kark, and in it an old man whose name people said carefully. Al-Mufid, the one who benefits. They did not give that name to everyone. He was tired by then. He had spent his life in front of rooms full of men who came to argue with him, answering them, not raising his voice. I wrote to him. In the month of Safar, in the year 410, a letter came to that house. A man carried it. No Nobody wrote down his name. He said only that he had brought it from a district near the Hijaz. And then he went away, and no one thought to ask him anything else. It began to the upright brother and the rightly guided friend, the Shaykh al-Mufid. And it said, because he was old and it was hard, and it is true. We are not neglectful of attending to you. We are not forgetful of remembering you. Our knowledge encompasses your reports. Nothing of your news escapes us. 2 years later, on a Thursday in Dhu al-Hijjah, a second letter came to the same door. There was no third. Now the part nobody notices. There was a young man in that house. He had come from Tus in Khorasan, a long road for a boy of 23 with nothing but the name of a teacher and the price of the journey. He was 25 when the first letter came, 27 when the second one came. I knew he was there. He did not know that I knew he carried books for older men and stayed at the back of the room. And if you had asked anyone in Baghdad who he was, they could not have told you. I could have told you. 9 months after the second letter, on the eve of a Friday in Ramadan, the old man died. They carried him out into the potash sellers' square, and a Sayyid of my own house stood in front of the body and led the prayer, and the square was not big enough, 80,000, the chroniclers said. And they were not our friends, and they counted anyway. Somewhere in that crowd, a young man from Khorasan, 28 years old. He had come a very long way to sit in front of that man, and he had got 5 years of him, and now he was standing among strangers and could not see over their heads. He did not know that the man leading the prayer would teach him for 23 more years. He did not know that they would come for his house one night and burn the chair he taught from. He did not know that 1,000 years later, a room full of people who have never seen Baghdad would say his name. He was a young man in a crowd who had lost his teacher. And I was watching. At the end of that first letter, I wrote him one more line. May God guard you with his eye that does not sleep, so keep it. He kept it. That is why you have it. There is no chain on those letters, no line of names, nothing for the scholars to weigh, only a bearer nobody named and an old man who folded a piece of paper and did not put it in the fire. And the boy at the back of the room grew up and spent his whole life doing the same thing, keeping, copying, checking. This is what it has always been, my beloved. Not palaces, not armies, not a state, and never a state. A man in a room keeping something because somebody who could not come had asked him to. That is the whole architecture. That is how the thirst at the river reached you in the name of every one of the 72. Somebody kept it. My Aunt Zainab kept it in a court in Damascus with the head of her brother in front of her. She was the first. And my mother, Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her, kept it. She asked to be buried where no one could find her, so that the not finding would itself be a thing that was kept. From her, to a house in Kark, to a chair burning in a street, to a room in the desert beside my grandfather's grave, to this room tonight. You are not the audience of this story. You are the next hands. To me, the Imam of our age, may our Lord hasten my return. My beloved, pray ardently for my return. And until then, keep what you have been given as he kept it, and as she kept it. I am not neglectful of attending to you. I am not forgetful of remembering you.
So now we have a very short supplication. So this is the prayer that Imam Zain al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, said at the grave of his grandfather, the commander of the faithful. It reaches us because Shaykh al-Tusi wrote it in Misbah al-Mutahajjid, the lamp of the one who keeps vigil. A man who spent 39 years visiting graves preserved the prayer an Imam said at a grave. We will inshallah close with a portion of it. O God, we have nowhere to go but your door. Peace be upon you, O trustee of God in his earth and his proof over his servants. I bear witness that you strove in God as is his due and acted by his book and followed the ways of his prophet. O God, the hearts of those who humble themselves are stricken with longing for you, and the paths of those who desire you are open. O God, peace be upon your prophets, upon Adam and Noah, Abraham and Ishmael and Ishaq and Moses and Aaron, David and Solomon, and Zachariah and John and Jesus the son of Mary, peace and blessings be upon them all. Upon every one of them whose names we know, and upon every one whose names only you know. And peace and blessings be upon Muhammad, and upon his family, and upon his righteous companions. O God, tonight we stand in the day of his going, the 28th of Safar, the day the light went out of Medina, the day his household became a household without him, and the community became a community that had to remember instead of ask. And the day 39 years on, that they poisoned his grandson, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, peace and blessings be upon him, and would not let him lie beside the man he had asked to lie beside. We were not there. And we are honest enough tonight to say that we do not know we would have been any use had we been there. But we are here, and we are still saying his name, 1400 years later, in a language he never heard, in a country he never saw, in a room he could not have imagined. Accept that from us, O God. It is what we have. O God, in his last days, he asked for something to write on, and it was not brought to him. We have been given the writing. Do not let us be the generation that had it and did not read it. O God, peace upon Fatima Zahra, the mother of her father, in whose house this whole inheritance began. Peace be upon the commander of the faithful, at whose grave this prayer was first said. Peace be upon Imam Hassan and upon Imam Hussein, the master of witnesses. Peace upon the Imams of guidance, one after another. Peace and blessings upon them all, who taught and were poisoned and taught again. O God, tonight we ask you for the ones who carried it, for the teachers, the ones who sat in the rooms of Baghdad and Qom and Najaf and Aleppo and Tripoli and so on, and copied and checked and corrected and taught men younger than themselves, and did not live to see what became of them. For the two we spoke of tonight, the teacher who received letters he was told to keep, and the Sayyid of the house of the Prophet who prayed over him in a square too small for the crowd. For the student who sat for 28 years and inherited everything, and lost it, and walked south with what he could carry. O God, for every one of them whose names we still say, and for the far greater number whose names nobody remembers, the copyists, the students who never became scholars, the ones who fed them, the ones who paid the 12 dinars and never saw what it bought. Accept it from them. They did it for us and they never met us. O God, we pray to you for Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Husseini Khamenei. May you protect him, the Wali Faqih of our time. Preserve him for us. Strengthen him. Guide him. Make him the leader you have appointed him to be, until the Imam of our age returns and the trust he carries is handed back to its rightful holder. O God, hasten the return of the Imam of our age. May our souls be his ransom. He wrote to a man in Baghdad 1,000 years ago and told him, "We are not neglectful of attending to you, nor forgetful of remembering you. O God, let us not be forgetful of him. Make us of his helpers, make us of his soldiers. Make us of those who, when he calls, are already standing." Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed we belong to God, and indeed to him we return. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And those who have wronged are going to know to what return they will be returned. And Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and He is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In the name of God, the All-Merciful, the Especially Merciful. You do not reason concerning His command, and you do not accept from those He has drawn near far-reaching wisdom. And what use are warnings to a people who will not believe?
Peace be upon us,
and upon the righteous servants of God. If you would turn through us toward God and toward us, then say what God the Exalted has said. Peace be upon the house of Yasin. Peace be upon you, O caller of God, O one made divinely learned in His signs.
peace be upon you,
O gate of God, O judge of His religion.
peace be upon you,
O vicegerent of God, O helper of His truth.
peace be upon you,
O proof of God, O evidence of what He wills.
peace be upon you,
O reciter of the book of God and its interpreter. Peace be upon you in the watches of your night and at the edges of your day.
peace be upon you,
O remnant of God upon His earth.
peace be upon you,
O covenant of God which He took and which He made fast.
peace be upon you,
O promise of God which He guaranteed. Peace be upon you, O standard raised and knowledge poured out, O succor, O vast mercy, a promise that will not be belied. Peace be upon you when you rise. Peace be upon you when you sit. Peace be upon you when you recite and when you make plain. Peace be upon you when you pray and when you stand in supplication. Peace be upon you when you bow and when you go down in prostration. Peace be upon you when you declare that He is one and when you declare that He is greater. Peace be upon you when you praise and when you ask forgiveness. Peace be upon you when the morning finds you and when the evening finds you. Peace be upon you in the night when it covers over and in the day when it blazes out. O Imam in whom trust is kept.
peace be upon you,
O one set foremost. O one longed for.
peace be upon you,
With every piece peace that peace can gather. I call you to witness, my master, that I bear witness, that there is no God but God alone, no partner beside him, and that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger. There is no beloved but him and those of his house. And I call you to witness, my master, that Ali, commander of the faithful, is his proof, and Hassan is his proof, and Hussein is his proof, and Ali, son of Hussein, is his proof, and Muhammad, son of Ali, is his proof, and Jafar, son of Muhammad, is his proof, and Musa, son of Jafar, is his proof, and Ali, son of Musa, is his proof,
and Muhammad, son of Ali, is his proof,
and Ali, son of Muhammad, is his proof,
and Hassan, son of Ali, is his proof.
and I bear witness that you are the proof of God. You are the first, and you are the last. And that your return is true, there is no doubt in it, on a day when no soul is profited by a faith it did not hold before, or by any good it did not earn while it still believed, and that death is true, and that Nakir and Nakir, the two who come with their questions, are true. And I bear witness that the unfolding is true, and the raising is true, and the bridge is true, and the place of watching is true, and the balance is true, and the mustering is true, and the reckoning is true, and the garden and the fire are true, and the promise and the warning of them both are true. My master, wretched is the one who set himself against you, and blessed is the one who obeyed you. So bear witness to what I have called you to witness. I am your friend, and I am free of your enemy. The truth is what you have been pleased with. The false is what you have been angered by. The good is what you have commanded. The wrong is what you have forbidden. So my soul believes in God alone, no partner beside him, and in his messenger, and in the commander of the faithful, and in you, my master, the first of you, and the last of you. My help is made ready for you. My love belongs to you and to no one else. Amen. Amen. In the name of God, the All-Merciful, the Especially Merciful. God, I ask you to send your blessing upon Muhammad, the prophet of your mercy, the word of your light, and to fill my heart with the light of certainty, and my breast with the light of faith, and my thinking with the light of clean intention, and my resolve with the light of knowledge, and my strength with the light of doing, and my tongue with the light of truth-telling, and my religion with the light of clear sight from you, and my seeing with the light of brightness, and my hearing with the light of wisdom, and my love with the light of belonging to Muhammad and the people of his house. Peace be upon them. Until I meet you and have kept your covenant and your pledge. Then let your mercy envelop me, O guardian, O praiseworthy. O God, send your blessing upon Muhammad, your proof in your earth and your vicegerent in your lands, the one who calls to your path, who stands up for your justice, who rises in revolt at your command, the guardian of the believers and the perdition of the disbelievers, who lifts the darkness and makes the truth shine, who speaks with wisdom and with truth, your complete word in your earth. The one who watches and waits, the one in fear, the sincere guardian, the ship of rescue and the standard of guidance, the light of the eyes of the world, the best of all who ever put on a shirt and wore a cloak, the one who clears away the blindness, who will fill the earth with fairness and justice as it was filled with tyranny and wrong. Indeed, you have power over all things.
O God,
send your blessing upon your friend and the son of your friends, those whose obedience you made a duty, whose right you made binding, from whom you removed all impurity and whom you purified with a purifying.
O God,
Help him, and by him give victory to your religion, and by him help your friends and his friends and those who follow him and those who stand with him, and make us of them.
O God,
Shelter him from the evil of every oppressor and every tyrant, and from the evil of everything you have made. Guard him before him and behind him, at his right hand and at his left. Keep watch over him, and bar any harm from reaching him, and in him keep safe your messenger and the family of your messenger. Make justice appear through him, strengthen him with victory. Help those who help him, and forsake those who forsake him, and break those who would break him. And through him shatter the tyrants of unbelief, and through him kill the disbelievers and the hypocrites and all the apostates, wherever they are, in the easts of the earth and its wests, on its land and on its sea. And fill the earth through him with justice, and make the religion of your prophet, God's blessing be upon him and his family, appear through him. And make me, O God, of those who help him, and stand with him, and follow him, and are counted among his own. And show me in the family of Muhammad, peace be upon them, what they have hoped for, and in their enemy, what they have feared. O God of truth,
Amen,
O possessor of majesty
and generosity,
and generosity, most merciful of the merciful.